Imagine. You're standing on a raft, not a ship, not a yacht, not even a wooden sailing vessel, just 9 massive balsa logs lashed together with hemp rope. No engine, no steel, no compass guiding you by satellite, no GPS, no emergency beacon, no rescue if something goes wrong. Below you lies nearly 3 miles of open ocean. Ahead, nothing but thousands of miles of uncertainty. And yet, someone willingly stepped aboard this fragile raft and pushed away from the coast of Peru, believing it might prove one of history's greatest assumptions wrong. Most people know this voyage by one name, Kon-Tiki. But what if Kon-Tiki wasn't simply an expedition? What if it was an experiment designed to challenge everything we thought we knew about the ancient world? Tonight, we're following clues that stretch from the towering Andes Mountains across the vast Pacific Ocean to some of the most isolated islands on Earth. We'll explore mysterious legends, ancient civilizations, forgotten navigation, and a question that continues to divide archaeologists, historians, and explorers nearly 80 years later. Could ancient people have crossed entire oceans thousands of years before Columbus? Or are we chasing a myth that refuses to die? A question that wouldn't go away. History is full of ideas that once sounded impossible. People believed the Earth was the center of the universe, that heavier-than-air flight could never happen, that the ocean floor was fixed and unchanging. Again and again, someone asked a dangerous question, and sometimes that question changed everything. In the early 20th century, another impossible question emerged. Could ancient civilizations have sailed across the Pacific Ocean? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. The Pacific is the largest ocean on Earth. It covers more than 60 million square miles. Storms rise without warning. Massive swells roll for thousands of miles. Modern sailors equipped with GPS, weather satellites, and sophisticated navigation still treat the Pacific with respect. So how could people living thousands of years ago, with nothing more than wooden rafts, ever hope to survive? To most scholars, the answer was simple. They couldn't. Case closed. Except one Norwegian explorer wasn't satisfied. His name, Thor Heyerdahl. Who was Thor Heyerdahl? Thor Heyerdahl wasn't trying to become famous. He wasn't searching for treasure, and he certainly wasn't trying to prove the existence of Atlantis. He was something far more dangerous. He was curious. Born in Norway in 1914, Heyerdahl developed an early fascination with nature, exploration, and human history. Unlike many archaeologists who spent their lives studying artifacts inside museums, Heyerdahl believed the best way to understand history was to experience it. If ancient people built something, build it yourself. If they sailed somewhere, try sailing there. If historians said something was impossible, test it. Not in theory, in reality. That philosophy would eventually change his life and ignite one of the greatest debates in archaeology. The legend of a god who came from the sea. The mystery truly began during Heyerdahl's travels through South America. There, he encountered stories that had survived for centuries, legends passed from one generation to the next, stories of a mysterious figure known as Viracocha. Descriptions varied. Some called him a creator, others a teacher, a bringer of knowledge. According to certain traditions, Viracocha arrived from across the sea. He taught agriculture, architecture, civilization. Then, just as mysteriously, he departed, sailing westward into the Pacific Ocean. To many historians, these were simply myths, symbolic stories, no different from countless creation legends around the world. But Heyerdahl couldn't ignore something. Why did so many ancient cultures speak of teachers arriving from the sea? And why did some traditions insist they left across the ocean? Could these legends preserve a distant memory, not of gods, but of explorers, visitors, travelers? It was an unsettling thought. Because if there was even the smallest grain of historical truth hidden inside those stories, it meant ancient people may have traveled much farther than anyone imagined. An ocean that wasn't a barrier. Most of us think of oceans as walls. Ancient people may have seen them differently. To experienced navigators, water wasn't an obstacle, it was a highway. Long before Europeans crossed the Atlantic, the Polynesians were navigating enormous distances across the Pacific using nothing more than stars, ocean swells, bird migrations, and cloud formations. Modern scientists now recognize them as some of the greatest navigators in human history. But Heyerdahl wondered, could someone have sailed in the opposite direction, from South America toward Polynesia? At the time, experts dismissed the idea immediately. The prevailing view held that such a voyage was impossible on primitive craft, yet Heyerdahl noticed something curious. No one had actually tried. History had declared it impossible without conducting the experiment. To Heyerdahl, that wasn't science. That was assumption, and assumptions can sometimes become invisible prisons. The decision that shocked the world. Most people would have written a book, perhaps published a paper, presented their ideas at a conference. Thor Heyerdahl chose something far more dramatic. He announced he intended to cross the Pacific Ocean on a prehistoric raft, not a replica improved with modern engineering. A raft built as closely as possible to the technology available in ancient South America. The scientific community largely laughed. Newspapers questioned his sanity. Experienced sailors warned he wouldn't survive. Friends begged him to reconsider. The Pacific wasn't forgiving, but Heyerdahl believed there was only one way to answer history's question. If the raft sank, his theory would sink with it. If it floated, history might need to ask new questions. Was he chasing history or a legend? As preparations began, another mystery quietly lingered in the background. What if Heyerdahl was asking the wrong question? Perhaps South Americans never settled Polynesia. Perhaps Polynesians reached South America. Or perhaps both civilizations found each other somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, long before any written record survived. It sounds extraordinary. Yet even today, archaeologists continue uncovering clues suggesting that ancient peoples may have been more connected than once believed. Some clues are accepted, others remain fiercely debated, and some continue to defy explanation. The deeper you look, the stranger the story becomes. In the next chapter, Thor Heyerdahl will do something almost everyone believed impossible. He'll build a raft using ancient methods, recruit a crew willing to gamble their lives, and set sail across one of the most dangerous oceans on Earth. But before they reach the open Pacific, something unexpected happens, an event that nearly ends the expedition before it truly begins. April 1947, along the coast of Peru. A strange scene was unfolding. Dock workers stopped what they were doing. Curious onlookers gathered along the shoreline. Even seasoned sailors shook their heads. They weren't watching the launch of a modern vessel. They were watching 6 men prepare to sail into the largest ocean on Earth, on what looked more like a pile of floating logs than a seaworthy craft. To many, it wasn't courage, it was madness. But to Thor Heyerdahl, it was the only way to answer a question that books alone never could. Could ancient technology accomplish what modern experts claimed was impossible? Building the impossible, Heyerdahl refused to improve the design. If this experiment was going to mean anything, it had to resemble what ancient South Americans might actually have built. Massive balsa logs formed the base. Each log stretched nearly 45 feet long. They were tied together with hemp rope. No steel bolts, no modern adhesives, no hidden reinforcements. A small bamboo cabin sat near the center. The mast carried a simple square sail. Even the steering oar was based on ancient designs. Critics immediately pointed out flaws. Balsa absorbs water. The raft will sink. The ropes will snap. The first major storm will tear it apart. Perhaps they were right. Heyerdahl accepted that possibility. If the raft failed, then the experiment would answer the question just as effectively. Failure would still be evidence. 6 men against the Pacific. Joining Heyerdahl were 5 remarkable men. Each brought different skills: navigation, engineering, photography, radio communication. None claimed to be master sailors. In fact, some had remarkably little experience crossing oceans. Yet every one of them understood the risk. The Pacific is unforgiving, even today. With satellite navigation and steel ships, it demands respect. In 1947, once they left shore, there would be no Coast Guard helicopter, no emergency locator beacon, no rescue ship waiting over the horizon. If something happened, the ocean would decide their fate. Setting sail on April 28th. The ropes were released. Slowly, the Kon-Tiki drifted away from Peru. The coastline grew smaller. Within hours, land disappeared entirely. Imagine that moment. No turning back, no engine to increase speed, no way to outrun storms, only wind, currents, and faith. For days, everything seemed peaceful. Blue skies, gentle waves, flying fish landed on deck, dolphins raced alongside the raft. It almost felt easy, but the Pacific has a way of reminding sailors who's truly in control. The first storm. Several days into the voyage, dark clouds gathered, the wind shifted, the sea transformed. Towering swells lifted the raft high into the air before dropping it into deep valleys between waves. Water crashed across the deck. The bamboo cabin groaned. The rope stretched under incredible strain. Every newspaper back home had predicted this moment. This is where the raft falls apart. Except it didn't. Something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting the ocean, the raft moved with it. The flexible balsa logs absorbed the punishment. Rather than breaking, the raft bent. Instead of resisting, it adapted. Sometimes, ancient engineering works precisely because it doesn't try to overpower nature. It works by cooperating with it. The ocean comes alive. Weeks passed. Life aboard settled into a routine, but beneath the surface, the Pacific revealed another world. Sharks appeared almost daily, massive whale sharks, long oceanic whitetips, schools of tuna. Flying fish exploded from the water like silver arrows. At night, the ocean glowed. Bioluminescent plankton turned every wave into shimmering blue fire. The crew described looking over the side and seeing trails of light following the raft into darkness. Beautiful, yet strangely unsettling. Imagine floating across an endless black ocean, watching invisible creatures illuminate the sea beneath you. It's easy to understand why ancient sailors filled these waters with legends. Sea monsters, spirits, gods. Perhaps those stories weren't born from imagination alone, but from witnessing a world few people ever experienced. Following the current, one of Heyerdahl's greatest observations had little to do with sailing. It had to do with drifting. The Humboldt Current carries cold water northward along South America. Farther west, the South Equatorial Current moves steadily toward Polynesia. Heyerdahl believed ancient mariners didn't necessarily need advanced navigation. If they entered the right current, the ocean itself could carry them west. Was that enough to explain the settlement of Polynesia? Most archaeologists still say no. Modern evidence overwhelmingly supports the idea that Polynesians originated from Southeast Asia and developed extraordinary navigation techniques over thousands of years. But Heyerdahl's voyage demonstrated something important. A westward crossing from South America was physically possible, not proven historically, but possible. And sometimes, possibility changes the questions scientists are willing to ask. A discovery no one expected. As the weeks turned into months, the crew began noticing something remarkable. The raft wasn't weakening. It seemed to be improving. The saturated balsa logs became heavier, lower in the water, more stable. What critics believed would be its greatest weakness became one of its greatest strengths. Ancient builders may have understood something modern engineers overlooked. Sometimes, the simplest solutions survive because generations of experience refined them. Knowledge doesn't always require written textbooks. Sometimes, it's passed from parent to child, master to apprentice, generation to generation, until one day, it's forgotten. But did ancient sailors really make the journey? This is where our mystery deepens, because proving a voyage could happen is very different from proving that it did. The archaeological evidence still strongly supports the migration of Polynesian peoples from island Southeast Asia. Linguistics, genetics, and archaeology all point in that direction. Yet, a few intriguing clues refuse to disappear. The sweet potato, a crop native to South America, was growing across Polynesia long before Europeans arrived. How did it get there? Did Polynesian sailors reach South America and bring it home? Did South Americans travel west? Or was there another explanation entirely? Scientists continue to debate the details. Recent genetic research even suggests there may have been limited contact between Polynesian and indigenous South American populations centuries before European exploration. Not enough to rewrite the accepted story of Polynesian origins, but enough to remind us that ancient peoples may have been more connected than we once believed. As Kon-Tiki drifted farther into the Pacific, Thor Heyerdahl had no idea that the greatest challenge still lay ahead: a coral reef, violent surf, and a collision that could destroy everything they had risked their lives to prove. But even if they survived, the real battle wouldn't begin on the ocean. It would begin after they returned home. When the scientific world asked one simple question, "Did you really prove anything?" And that question would spark a debate that continues to this very day. 101 days. That was how long Thor Heyerdahl and his crew drifted across the Pacific. For more than 3 months, they had trusted nothing but the wind, the currents, and a raft built almost entirely from giant balsa logs. The experiment was nearly over. Ahead, they could finally see land, tiny islands, barely visible on the horizon. To the exhausted crew, it looked like salvation, but the Pacific wasn't finished testing them. The final obstacle. The Tuamotu Islands aren't surrounded by welcoming beaches. They're protected by razor-sharp coral reefs, beautiful from above, deadly from sea level. As the Kon-Tiki approached, the current began pulling the raft directly toward the reef. The crew couldn't steer away. The wind was no longer in their favor. Wave after wave pushed the raft closer. Then, impact. The massive logs slammed against coral. The sound echoed across the lagoon. Another wave, another collision. The raft broke apart exactly as critics had predicted. But here's the difference. It broke apart after completing more than 4,300 miles across the Pacific. The crew survived. The experiment was a success, at least partially. A hero returns. When Heyerdahl returned home, he was celebrated around the world. Newspapers called him fearless. His documentary won an Academy Award. His book became an international bestseller. Millions were inspired, not because everyone believed his theory, but because he had dared to test it. In science, experiments matter. They force us to confront assumptions. And Kon-Tiki had proven one undeniable fact: ancient-style rafts could cross the Pacific Ocean. But immediately, another question emerged. Did that actually happen in history? The scientific debate begins. Mainstream archaeology responded carefully. Researchers acknowledged the voyage was extraordinary. They agreed it demonstrated possibility. But possibility isn't proof. Over the following decades, archaeologists uncovered overwhelming evidence showing that Polynesian peoples originated in island Southeast Asia. Language patterns, pottery styles, genetics, ancient settlements, navigation traditions, piece after piece supported the same conclusion. The first Polynesians weren't accidental drifters. They were master navigators, perhaps the greatest ocean voyagers the world has ever known. Using stars, ocean swells, bird migrations, cloud reflections, and generations of knowledge, they intentionally crossed thousands of miles of open ocean. long before European sailors dared venture so far. Today, few serious researchers dispute that remarkable achievement. Yet, some mysteries remained. The sweet potato mystery. Imagine you're an archaeologist. You excavate an ancient Polynesian village. Among the remains, you discover evidence of sweet potatoes. At first, nothing seems unusual until you realize one astonishing fact. Sweet potatoes originated in South America, not Asia, not Polynesia, South America. Even more intriguing, the Polynesian name for the sweet potato, kumara, closely resembles words used in parts of South America. Coincidence? Shared history? Or something else? How did a South American crop arrive on islands separated by thousands of miles of open ocean? Centuries before Columbus? Scientists have proposed several explanations. Perhaps Polynesian sailors reached South America, collected sweet potatoes, then returned home. Perhaps there was limited contact between the two regions. Or perhaps something we're still missing. Whatever the answer, the sweet potato refuses to disappear from this story. It remains one of history's most fascinating botanical mysteries. DNA opens a new door. Then, in the 21st century, science offered another intriguing clue. Advances in genetic analysis allowed researchers to compare DNA from Polynesian and indigenous South American populations. The results surprised many scholars. Several studies suggested evidence of limited prehistoric contact between the groups. Not large-scale migration, not colonization, but contact. Somewhere, sometime, people from opposite sides of the Pacific may have met. The exact details remain debated. Researchers continue refining the evidence, but the possibility itself changes the conversation. Perhaps Heyerdahl wasn't entirely wrong. Perhaps he was simply asking the wrong question. Instead of asking whether South Americans settled Polynesia, maybe the better question is, how often did ancient civilizations encounter one another? The ancient sailors. Here's something that rarely receives enough attention. Ancient people weren't primitive. They were observant, patient, resourceful. The Polynesians memorized hundreds of stars. They recognized ocean swells invisible to most of us. They understood seasonal winds, bird behavior, cloud formations above distant islands. Entire navigation systems existed, without maps, without compasses, without writing. Today, master navigators in parts of the Pacific still preserve fragments of that knowledge. Watching them sail, it's impossible not to wonder how much ancient wisdom has already been lost. Legends of visitors from across the sea. As Heyerdahl studied cultures across the Pacific, he noticed something curious. Stories, again and again. Different civilizations described mysterious visitors arriving by sea. Teachers, culture bringers, wise leaders. Were these merely symbolic myths or echoes of forgotten encounters? Anthropologists caution us not to treat mythology as literal history. And they're right. Legends evolve, they change, they absorb new ideas over centuries, but myths sometimes preserve surprising memories. Floods once dismissed as legend have later found geological support. Ancient cities believed imaginary have eventually been discovered beneath sand and jungle. So the question remains, how much history survives inside myth, and how much myth hides real history? A bigger mystery emerges. Maybe Kon-Tiki was never really about one raft. Maybe it was about something much larger. What if humanity has repeatedly underestimated ancient civilizations? Not because they lacked intelligence, but because we've mistaken ancient technology for ancient capability. Simple tools can still produce extraordinary achievements. Simple boats can still cross oceans. Simple observations can unlock astonishing navigation. Sometimes, the greatest mistake we make is confusing simplicity with ignorance. In our final chapter, we'll journey beyond Kon-Tiki itself into the worlds of Atlantis, Mu, lost civilizations, sunken continents, and one haunting question. If ancient people really were capable of extraordinary voyages, what else might they have accomplished that we've forgotten? I'm Tony Sweet, and this is Truth Be Told. Imagine you're standing alone on a remote island somewhere in the Pacific. No airports, no highways, no cities, just endless blue water stretching to every horizon. As the sun disappears beneath the ocean, you begin to wonder who stood here before you, who first looked out across these waters and asked, what's beyond that horizon? For thousands of years, the Pacific has inspired stories of lost lands, forgotten kingdoms, and civilizations swallowed by time. Some believe these are nothing more than myths. Others wonder, could legends preserve fragments of history we've yet to understand? The legend of Mu. One of the most famous stories is that of Mu. According to 19th century writers, Mu was said to be a vast continent in the Pacific Ocean, a highly advanced civilization, prosperous, powerful, until it vanished beneath the sea in a catastrophic disaster. Supporters claim survivors spread across the world, bringing architecture, astronomy, religion, and engineering to distant cultures. It's a fascinating story. There's just one problem. Modern geology has found no evidence that a continent like Mu ever existed in the Pacific Ocean. Plate tectonics tells us continents don't simply disappear beneath the sea in the way these stories describe. Most historians consider Mu a literary invention that later became part of alternative history. But while Mu itself lacks scientific support, the legend speaks to something deeper, our fascination with the idea that an earlier civilization may have possessed knowledge now lost. Atlantis, a familiar story. Then there's Atlantis. Plato described a powerful island civilization that disappeared beneath the sea in a single day and night. Was Atlantis based on a real place, an allegory, a warning about arrogance, or perhaps memories of ancient disasters passed down through generations? No consensus exists, yet Atlantis continues to capture imaginations because it asks the same question Kon-Tiki asks. What if history is more complicated than we've been taught? The ancient builders around the world, we find extraordinary monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the massive stone blocks of Baalbek, the precision walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, the mysterious platforms of Nan Madol in Micronesia, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Each site reminds us that ancient people were capable of astonishing achievements, not because they had lasers or alien technology, but because they possessed remarkable skill, organization, and knowledge. Sometimes we underestimate ancient civilizations because we assume technological simplicity means intellectual simplicity. History tells a different story, again and again. The real legacy of Kon-Tiki. So, did Thor Heyerdahl prove that South Americans settled Polynesia? No. The evidence today strongly supports that the first Polynesians originated from island Southeast Asia and spread across the Pacific through extraordinary navigation and exploration. Did he prove that ancient civilizations were capable of remarkable ocean voyages? Without question. His raft crossed more than 4,000 miles using technology available thousands of years ago. That achievement alone changed archaeology because it reminded scientists that before dismissing an idea as impossible, we should ask, has anyone actually tested it? Heyerdahl wasn't right about everything. Science rarely works that way. But he succeeded in opening new conversations, and those conversations continue today. What we still don't know. Despite decades of research, questions remain. How exactly did knowledge spread between distant cultures? Were there occasional encounters between South Americans and Polynesians before Europeans arrived? How did crops like the sweet potato travel across the Pacific? What stories have disappeared because no one wrote them down? How many ancient voyages ended successfully, leaving behind no monuments, no written records, only legends? The deeper we explore, the more we realize history isn't a completed book, it's a manuscript, still being written. Why this story matters. Kon-Tiki isn't ultimately about a raft, it's about curiosity. It's about refusing to accept easy answers. It's about understanding that science doesn't advance by protecting old ideas. It advances by asking better questions. Some questions confirm what we already believe. Others force us to rethink everything. Thor Heyerdahl asked one of those questions, and whether you agree with his conclusions or not, his courage to test the impossible changed the conversation forever. Final thoughts. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't whether ancient sailors crossed the Pacific. Perhaps it's this: how many incredible accomplishments have been forgotten, simply because no one believed they were possible. History has surprised us before. Ancient cities once dismissed as myths have been uncovered beneath deserts and jungles. Long-lost civilizations continue to emerge through archaeology. Every year, new discoveries reshape what we thought we knew. So maybe the greatest lesson of Kon-Tiki is humility, because every generation believes it understands the past until the past surprises us again. Tonight, we followed a raft across the world's largest ocean, but perhaps the real journey wasn't across water, it was across certainty. Thor Heyerdahl reminded us that history isn't built only by those who write books. Sometimes it's changed by those willing to risk everything to ask, what if? And maybe that's the question we should all ask a little more often, because somewhere beneath the waves, hidden beneath layers of time, or waiting in the next archaeological discovery, there may still be chapters of human history we have yet to uncover. I'm Tony Sweet, and this has been Truth Be Told. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves history, archaeology, and the unexplained. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the greatest mysteries aren't always found in the stars. Sometimes, they're hidden in our own past.